One of the most requested games I got on this channel is ÜberSoldier 2. Well, that's a sequel, so it felt disingenuous to not play the original first. But the original isn't received well and is apparently a bad game. So, we answer the question again, how bad is ÜberSoldier really? ÜberSoldier was made by a Russian developer and as such is a PC exclusive. You can't buy this on consoles. And finding it online is pretty difficult. Unlike the sequel, which is on Steam, this is not, and it's not on any digital storefront I could find. So I went out of my way to try to find some download for it online, and amazingly there's a few torrents with one seeder. That one seeder was all I really needed to get the game, so thankfully I was able to get it somehow. It was originally released in Russia in 2005 and then in North America in 2006. You might be saying this game looks awful, but keep in mind, 2005, this game actually looks pretty decent for that time. For comparison's sake, here's some other shooters that also came out in 2005. Quake 4, Perfect Dark Zero, Area 51, SWAT 4, Project Snowblind, Serious Sam 2, Call of Duty 2, Timesplitter's Future Perfect, Star Wars Republic Commando, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Battlefield 2, Brothers in Arms, Road to Hill 30, and Fear. Now these games are somewhat old, and you probably have some pretty nostalgic feelings towards them. This also means you probably remember them looking better than they actually do. Seriously, go YouTube some gameplay of these games and they won't look as good to you today as your mind seems to remember. There are obviously some exceptions, Fear aged gracefully to me, but the rest of them, they're pretty dated. And when you compare the average of these games to ÜberSoldier, ÜberSoldier actually looks a little bit better than the average, so it doesn't look bad for its time. The issue with this game was not graphics, the issue with this game was almost everything else. And I'll get to that in a moment, but let me talk about what you actually have to do to get this game running on modern PCs. It came out in 2005, so it's expected you have to do some workarounds. For the most part, the game works perfectly fine on modern PCs. You don't really have to do a whole lot to bring it up to specs. The problem is, the things you do need to change are a complete pain in the ass to change. For example, if you want this to run at your native resolution that you use nowadays, which probably wasn't standard back in 2005, you need to change something in an ini file. You might be saying, oh whatever, that's standard for old games, but it's the way you do it. Since my 1440p monitor died, I run on 1920 by 1080p. If I want to play this game in 1080p, I have to open up the config ini file, find the corresponding resolution line, and then apply a formula to get the resolution I want. I can't just put in 1920 by 1080 by res y and res x like everything else. The formula is height multiplied by 65,536 plus width. So for 1080p, I had to take 1080, multiply that by 65,536 plus 1920, which gives me 70,780,800, and just put that where the line originally is. Who fucking coded this game this way? It's a minor hindrance, but what the fuck? Why can't I just put the resolution in that I want? On top of this, you then have to change something that's CL HUD FOV to 0.65. What this will do is move your hands corresponding to your aspect ratio. If you don't do this, your hands will be in a weird part of the screen that isn't correct at all. But to make things even better, the FOV and aspect ratio can only be changed through a hex editor. Great. You open up xtend3d.dll in a hex editor, and you have to edit this stuff. The aspect ratio isn't too complicated to change. You know what 69 is, you know what you have to change it to, not a big deal. The FOV though requires a bit of trial and error. You find this line, 61, 0B, B6, 3B. You change the B6 part higher and the FOV goes higher. The default is 70, which is not very good. For me, I prefer it to be closer to 100, but I'll deal with 90 in this case since the animations were not made for anything above what the default FOV is. To raise the FOV, you have to change this B6 to a higher letter. C6 gives you slightly higher FOV, D6 gives you slightly higher FOV, etc, etc. Again, this is trial and error to kind of see what looks best and works best with the game. But I did manage to get it around 90 FOV, which is why you see some of the animations look a little bit broken. They weren't meant to be seen at an FOV this high, but I will take that over playing on an FOV that's so small. The rest of the stuff works as expected. The game doesn't stutter, it doesn't lag, there's no frame rate issues, there's no mouse acceleration. For the most part, it's a good PC port. The small things you do have to change are just a pain in the ass to change. It was this close to being a perfect PC release, but just made a few weird choices. And as a side note, anytime I mention FOV, everyone seems to lose their shit in the comments like they don't understand that changing the FOV is kind of very important to PC gaming. When I complain about the FOV being too small, that's because the standard on PC has always been 90. Anything below that isn't acceptable, and a smaller FOV can make people get motion sick. Thankfully, I'm not one of these people, but it bothers me to basically be wearing horse blinds while I'm playing a game. And it's not just a me thing. When you say no one cares, what you're actually saying is you don't care, because a lot of fucking people care. An FOV slider is standard on PC for a reason. People care, and it really makes the game worse when the FOV is too small. Okay, rant done. Now let me rant about the video game because it gives me a lot to rant about. If you like to play video games for the story, then this is not the game for you. What the fuck is this story? The main character in this game is a German soldier by the name of Karl Stolz. At the beginning of this game, you are killed in duty, but you get resurrected and acquire supernatural powers. The caveat to this is that when you wake up, the first person that gives you orders, you have to listen to them. This can't backfire in any way whatsoever. Oh shit, it backfired. So a member of the German resistance broke into your compound, and she is the first person you talk to upon waking up. Now you listen to her instead. At this point, the whole story of the game is simply to just dismantle the ÜberSoldier program. The fact that this game takes place during World War II honestly doesn't mean anything. The only relevance to World War II is the fact that you're shooting Nazis and you have World War II guns. You don't change the tide of the war or go to any battles that happened, you just have World War II guns, and that's basically it. Maria at some point in the story dies, and at the end of the game you resurrect her and then you kiss just because why not? I honestly had very little idea what was going on in this story, and it doesn't help that holy shit, this game is the best voice acting I've ever heard in my life.
Wow, no anti-aircraft guns around here anymore.
Ah, at last! The bomb is on its way, and it'll let off a fine firework.
Now what?
Maria is with a 3rd assault group. They need help.
Maria? What the hell is she doing here?
She wants to help you, Carl. You know her, stubborn. She's outside to the left of the gates.
I'm going to her.
It feels unfair to make fun of the voice acting in this game. It's a Russian first-person shooter. Of course it's not going to have good English voice acting, but oh my goodness, this is way worse than I could have ever imagined. I came into this knowing it was going to have hilariously bad voice acting, and it still blew my mind. This game could have the best story of all time, and I still would not be able to take it seriously. Also, what the hell is this person? His head is comically oversized compared to his body, and he looks like a mixture of Yao Ming and Gabe Newell's long-lost love child. But okay, this is a first-person shooter, so maybe I should judge the game on, the shooty bits. That's the whole point of it. At first, I actually didn't quite understand why this game got such negative reviews. The guns actually feel fine, the reloading animations are pretty smooth for 2005. ADSing is a little bit awkward as it hadn't quite been fully standardized yet at that time. ADSing itself is really slow, and if you're ADSing while walking, it's really difficult to shoot anything. On top of all that, you kind of don't really need ADS most of the time. Hipfire is perfectly accurate, and really the only time you'll need ADS is if they're really, really far away. Gunplay in this game genuinely isn't that bad. Guns recoil accordingly, enemies aren't bullet spongy, headshots work as intended, and for the first half of the game I was kind of enjoying it. It was never amazing, but it definitely was just a decent time-wasting mediocre shooter. Well, the review scores really start showing the second half of the game. You see, during the first half of the game it's almost all hallway shooting. You have a linear path to go, the enemies don't really have too many different ways to shoot you from, so it's mostly just running through and mowing down enemies. This probably sounds mediocre, and that's because it is, but it's not bad. But the second half of the game suddenly sees its bullshit level jump by 10. The map design gets a lot worse, and when I say worse, I mean the game just kind of dumps you into big open areas with aimbot enemies all shooting at you and you have little cover. This wasn't a problem in the first half of the game because it was almost all hallway shooting, so them being aimbots really didn't mean anything, you could kill them before they could do anything to you. But in the second half of the game, when you have many enemies shooting at you in a big open space with only one door to enter that big open space, presents a little bit of a problem that's frustrating and not fun. This is where I mentioned the supernatural abilities that you get, which is really only one: a shield. The shield is incredibly useful. It makes a big bubble around you, it stops all bullets, and if you let go it'll send the bullets back at them. On top of this, if they shoot the shield and then you walk into them with those bullets in the shield, it just kills them because the bullets touch them. This sounds useful because it really is. It lets you close the gap between you and the enemies. The problem is it's very limited, so if you don't have this and you get stuck into an open area encounter, you're kind of fucked. The game does say you have 2 supernatural abilities, but really the other one is just a way to get more health. If you knife 3 enemies in a row without killing someone in another way, it'll give you 2 extra health. This doesn't sound like much, but if you do this a lot, it will add up. I wasn't really focusing on doing this, but by the end of the game I had 120 health instead of the base 100. 20 health is a lot, and I can only imagine how much I would have gotten if I actually focused on this. Now that I think about it, I don't know if this game has a cap to your health or not. In theory, you could get as much health as you wanted as long as you still had more enemies. But maybe there is a cap, so I'm unsure about that. The other thing you can level up is your shield. If you get 3 headshots in a row, this makes your shield better. These are the only 2 things you can level up, and this is called the emotion system. Apparently the only emotions your character has is anger and rage. I'm not kidding you, anger and rage. Those are the 2 quote-unquote emotions they chose. First of all, what's the difference? Secondly, rage? The more I played this game, the more I realized, yeah, this is definitely a Russian first-person shooter. Like, I already knew, but this just cemented it. I just can't get over this line. Press F1 for emotion tutorial. Man, if only real life did that. Anyway, as I was talking about before I got distracted, the whole second half of the game is poorly constructed open maps with a bunch of aimbot enemies shooting at you, putting you in bad situations. The game also loves explosions. If something can maybe possibly explode, it will explode. I never knew what to expect exploding because it never gave me a reason for things exploding. You shoot somebody in a window, it's probably going to explode even if there isn't an explosive there.
Oh my god, why do all these windows explode?
This sounds like a good thing, explosions are fun, but this is also terrible for the player because the game loves to do this to you too. You will die a lot by a random explosion that you had no warning of. I don't mean from grenades, I just mean from explosive barrels or for random bombings coming from above from planes. You have no idea where they're going to land, you just kind of die. Yeah, this game really turns up its bullshit factor. But speaking of grenades, grenades are also bullshit too, because this game has a knockdown mechanic. Great, everyone loves those, right? If a grenade blows up near you, you get knocked over and you're stuck in this standing up animation where the enemies can shoot you as you're standing up, but you can't do anything. Taking control away from the player almost never works out. Don't fucking do this. I hate it in any game where this happens. This also applies to you, Wolfenstein. But even better than that, this is 2005, so grenade indicators weren't really popular at the time, and grenades blow up very quickly, so you have little warning of that grenade that's gonna land right next to you. They also do a ton of damage, because they're grenades. To top all of this off, there are a few enemies that randomly show up. I only saw them twice the entire time. 3 enemies in total. These enemies spawn dust devils around you that you cannot avoid, will pull you into them, will spin you around in debris, making this hurt you, and you can't shoot explosives out of them because you're probably going to shoot the debris, so that's probably going to kill you. They also have more health than the other enemies. These enemies are bizarre because they show up about 3/4 of the way through the game for the first time and you only see them twice. But it doesn't change the fact they're really fucking annoying. The first sign that something was going wrong was during the submarine level. On this level, you disguise yourself as a worker and sneak onto a submarine. This is a bit odd on its own because submarines are out of contact for a good 6 to 8 months at a time. Well, after a certain point, the Germans realize there's a spy on one of their submarines, so what do? Instead of telling that submarine, hey, you got a spy, they have all their submarines in the area try to take down this submarine. Obviously, yeah, what else would you do? Once this happens, you kill everyone on your submarine, and then single-handedly fight down all the other submarines in the area. After this, you contact your allies, they say, hey, we're too far away, you have to deal with this shit on your own, and then the Germans send their entire fleet after you. This turns into a turret defense section. Great. This was the only time in the game that I genuinely got annoyed on stream. This turret defense section lasts for a good solid 10 minutes of just shooting down non-stop planes. To make it even better, you can't use your shield while you're on a turret, there's no medkits around you, and you can't let the submarine get destroyed. Great! Some of the planes try to shoot you and kill you, some of the planes drop torpedoes which you can shoot and blow up in the water before they hit the submarine. If this doesn't sound fun, you'd be right, it's really annoying and lasted for far too long. I don't know why this even exists in the game, because usually when developers do this, they're just trying to put more time into their game, but this game isn't really that short. It's around 6 hours long, which is just barely shy of the average length, so there's no reason for that to be in there to begin with. I'm making this game sound more difficult than it is because it isn't really that difficult, it's just irritating. The difficulty that's in the game feels highly artificial, a lot of trial and error, and it gets very frustrating in the worst way possible. Not a good challenge to overcome, just an annoying one. And I have to state this because there will always be those people that say, it's not that hard, you're just bad at the game. You're right, it isn't that hard. Again, it's just annoying. There are 2 types of bad games. There are bad games that are so bad they're funny and hilarious to play, and then there are bad games that just have artificial difficulty, and these are the ones I hate more than the other ones, even when they're not actually that difficult. Because these are generally just mediocre shooters that have an extra layer of bullshit shoved into them, and that's what this game is. It even has a final boss that actually isn't that bad, but could have been so much better. So you are the ÜberSoldier, correct? Well, at the end of the game you fight the newest, latest ÜberSoldier, who is obviously better than you. This is really just a big dude that has a gun that does a lot of damage to you and can shoot rockets. At first I thought maybe I had to do something else to get rid of him, like shoot something in the room and stun him, but no, you just shoot him a bunch. This isn't really portrayed to the player because he doesn't flinch when you shoot him, so you don't know if you're doing something wrong or not. Eventually, if you shoot him enough, he does get stunned and goes down into this bubble shield thing that you can also do, and at this point, you're basically just getting more health and reloading the guns you have, and then you do it again. This happens 6 or 7 times, so you don't really know if you're actually doing damage to him, and you just keep doing it until he eventually dies. It's a guess, and there's not really a whole lot of details shown to the player. Just having a simple, boss health bar would have fixed everything. You would have known, oh hey, I'm actually doing damage to him. and then it would have made this boss actually okay. But when a boss doesn't give the player enough feedback to know if you're actually doing something right or wrong, that's when the boss isn't really a very good boss. This doesn't mean to restart it, there are ways to salvage it, like I said, with a boss health bar, so it could have been much worse, but it still could have been better. Honestly, I think that's how I can describe this game as a whole. Could have been worse, could have been a lot better. And so here is where we ask the question, are those review scores accurate? Yeah, pretty easily these are very accurate review scores. It's a mediocre shooter that does some things right and some things horribly wrong. Some of the lowest review scores it got was a 4 out of 10, and I can easily see that. Some of the best it got was a 6.5 out of 10, and I can also see that. It really depends on what part of the game you remember. Do you remember the gunplay feeling pretty satisfying and just popping headshots off on Germans with the 1911 left and right? Then you're probably going to give it a higher review score. Do you remember the later part of the levels where the game just kind of throws artificial difficulty at you? You're probably going to give it a low score. Unfortunately for me, that's generally the part of these games that I remember. Would I recommend playing this game? No, but I already played it for you, so you don't need to. With that said, apparently UberSoldier 2 is a good game, and I was already aware of this, but again, I just wanted to play the first one before the sequel, so I will get to UberSoldier 2 and see if it's actually a good shooter. But for now, that sums up this analysis on UberSoldier. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Thanks to all of you that watch me over on Twitch. And an extra thanks goes to all of you that support me on Twitch by subscribing, and if you want to help me farther, you can go over to patreon.com/Jarek4. Or you can click on the icon to the bottom right, that'll link you to my Patreon as well. If you want to see some of my other videos, click this stuff all around here. Thank all of you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.